the beginning of Annie Hall, Alvy Singer tells two jokes he considers essential to his worldview. The first is about two elderly women at a Catskill resort. One says, "The food at this place is really terrible," to which the other replies, "Yeah, I know, and such small portions." The second, attributed to Groucho Marx, is about refusing to join any club that would accept him as a member. These gags, suffused with a uniquely comic pessimism, are more than mere punchlines. They are the twin pillars of a worldview Keaton's characters would come to embody over a remarkable career. Her characters are women who understand life as Alvy does, full of loneliness and misery and suffering and unhappiness, and yet they also feel that it's all over much too quickly. They are complex, contradictory, and deeply human, forever navigating the absurdity of wanting the very things that cause them pain. Through her iconic roles in films like Annie Hall, Something's Gotta Give, The First Wives Club, Five Flights Up, and Darling Companion, Keaton has built an enduring and resonant portrait of the modern woman. This essay is a tribute to the key facets of that cinematic legacy. 1. The architect of the adorably flawed heroine. Long before it was fashionable for a romantic lead to be defined by her eccentricities, Diane Keaton's breakout persona in Annie Hall established a new kind of female protagonist. This was not an idealized figure of glamour or a damsel in distress, but a quirky, intelligent, and profoundly relatable woman whose charm stemmed directly from her authentic imperfections. She was a woman you felt you could know. A strategic departure from the polished artifice of Hollywood convention and the blueprint for the Keaton archetype that would follow. 1.1. An authentic vernacular. The character of Annie Hall is the master sketch for the Keaton persona. Her conversational style is a symphony of charmingly hesitant exclamations and idiosyncratic verbal tics. Phrases like la-da-da, neat, and the perpetually flustered, well, oh well, became part of the cultural lexicon. Her fashion sense was equally distinctive and personal. When Alvy compliments her tie, she explains it matter-of-factly. "This tie is a present from Grammy Hall." These were not just character traits, they were declarations of independence from the conventional Hollywood heroine. Keaton's Annie was a woman who dressed and spoke for herself, creating a cultural touchstone for a generation of women who saw their own endearing awkwardness reflected on screen for the first time. 1.2. The restless interior. Beneath the quirky exterior, Annie Hall possesses a restless intellect and a deep emotional curiosity that coexist with her profound insecurities. We see this mind in motion as she explores her passions, from her photography. I sort of dabble around, you know? To her nerve-wracking singing auditions and her eventual embrace of adult education and psychoanalysis. The film masterfully reveals the gap between her inner life and her outward presentation. During her first meeting with Alvy, her internal monologue is a cascade of self-doubt. "He probably thinks I'm a yo-yo. I'm not smart enough for him." A stark contrast to the slightly scattered but engaging conversation she maintains. This technique gives the character a rich interiority, presenting a woman who is simultaneously a work in progress and a fully formed, compelling individual. This uniquely vulnerable and intelligent persona became the vessel through which Keaton would, for decades to come, explore the equally complex terrain of modern love. 2. The geography of the heart. Navigating love in all its seasons. A central pillar of Keaton's cinematic legacy is the nuanced exploration of romantic relationships across the entire span of a woman's life. Her characters offer a masterclass in the evolution of love, moving with grace and authenticity from the neurotic first spark of connection to the comfortable cadence of a long-term partnership, and just as powerfully, through the painful aftermath of betrayal. 2.1. The shock of new love. Keaton masterfully portrays the surprise and vulnerability of finding romance late in life, most notably as the successful playwright Erica Barry in Something's Gotta Give. Before meeting the incorrigible Harry Sanborn, Erica declares she was sort of closed up for business, a sentiment many women recognize. The rediscovery of intimacy is captured with a blend of humor and tenderness in the scene where she and Harry first kiss. Overwhelmed by the feeling, she remarks, "I'm so glad they still work. I haven't used them for kissing in such a long time." The line is funny, but it's also a poignant admission of a part of herself she thought was gone forever, now shockingly reawakened. 2.2. The cadence of enduring partnership. In Five Flights Up, Keaton explores the quiet, deeply forged bond of a decades-long marriage as Ruth Carver. The film centers on the decision she and her husband Alex face in selling their beloved Brooklyn apartment, a choice made not in calm reflection but amidst a cascade of crises. Their partnership is tested by a sudden, expensive medical emergency for their dog, $10,000 for a ruptured disc, a citywide terrorist scare involving a tanker truck on the Williamsburg Bridge, and the chaos of an open house filled with intrusive strangers picking apart their life's work. Their conversations are not filled with grand romantic declarations, but with the practical, affectionate shorthand of a lifetime together, a functional resilience holding firm while their world is in turmoil. Alex's final reflection encapsulates this perfectly. Maybe one day we'll sell, stop climbing the stairs, but for now we'll just deal with what is. The important thing is it brought us back here, together. It's a portrait of love that has weathered life's uncertainties and found its strength in simple, steadfast presence. 2.3. The aftermath of betrayal. Keaton's characters are never more relatable than in their moments of heartbreak. In The First Wives Club, her character Annie Paradis is blindsided when her husband, Aaron, asks for a divorce immediately after they've been intimate. Her shocked, wounded cry, "But we just made love," is a raw expression of ultimate betrayal. Similarly, Erica Berry, who prides herself on her composure, is shattered by Harry's abandonment. When he expresses surprise at her emotional state, she confronts him with the unvarnished truth. "This is heartbroken. How's that for impervious, huh?" In both films, these devastating moments are not endings but powerful catalysts, propelling the characters toward profound personal reinvention. This journey of reinvention often leads Keaton's characters to discover that the most essential connections are not romantic ones at all, but the bonds they forge to find new purpose and strength. 3. Beyond romance, the power of found connections. While romantic love is a central theme in her work, Diane Keaton's characters often find their most profound sense of purpose and strength in non-traditional relationships. These connections, whether with an animal companion who offers unconditional love or a circle of friends forged in shared adversity, are portrayed as equally, if not more, vital for their self-realization and ultimate happiness. 3.1. The promise of a darling companion. In Darling Companion, Keaton's character, Beth Winter, feels adrift in her own life, disconnected from her self-absorbed surgeon husband. Her sense of purpose is reignited in a single impulsive moment when she and her daughter rescue a dog from the side of a freeway. When the dog, aptly named Freeway, goes missing, Beth's frantic and passionate dedication to finding him becomes a manifestation of a deeper need for love and meaning. She defends the intensity of her search to her husband, Joseph, in a powerful declaration. "Love is love. It doesn't matter if it's a dog. When I rescued Freeway, I made a promise to him and to myself that I was going to take care of him. The promise is not just to the animal, but to the part of herself that yearns to care and be cared for." 3.2. The strength of the First Wives Club. Nowhere is the theme of female solidarity more vibrantly explored than in the First Wives Club. The film's mission is set in motion by the tragic death of their college friend Cynthia, whose final letter contains a heartbreaking plea: "I wish I still had our friendship. Please take care of each other." This becomes the trio's rallying cry. Fueled by their own betrayals, they transform personal pain into collective power. Brenda's vengeful assertion, "We help them rise, we can help them fall," is tempered by Annie's more empowering vision. "All we need is us. Three women who aren't afraid to fight, to stand up for our dignity, huh? For our self-esteem." Their bond, reborn from grief and anger, becomes their greatest asset, proving that the club they were kicked out of was far less valuable than the one they formed together. The strength these women derive from found connections, however, is ultimately a reflection of the profound and often contradictory relationship they have with themselves, a tension between a carefully constructed exterior and a fiercely guarded heart. 4. The unseen armor on turtlenecks, tears, and self-worth. The signature dynamic of a Diane Keaton character is a fiercely protected inner vulnerability masked by a competent, intelligent, and sometimes formidable exterior. This emotional armor is perhaps best symbolized by the endless collection of turtlenecks worn by Erica Barry in Something's Gotta Give. They are a stylish, literal representation of a woman who keeps her neck and her heart covered, shielding her true feelings from the world until she has no choice but to expose them. 4.1. The performance of invulnerability. When Harry Sanborn first meets Erica Barry, he sees her as flinty, impervious, and a tower of strength. She is a successful, self-sufficient woman who appears to need no one. This public persona makes her private collapse all the more powerful. The catalyst is not just a breakup. It is a breakup that comes immediately after she has taken the monumental step of sleeping with a man for the first time in years. This profound act of vulnerability makes her subsequent heartbreak a complete shattering of the armor she has worn for so long. The audience sees the chasm between the woman who runs her life with precision and the one who sobs uncontrollably, overwhelmed by a depth of feeling she had long suppressed. This journey is also central to Annie Paradis in The First Wives Club, who begins the film as a doormat and a wimp, so conditioned to subservience that her own mother dismisses her need for agency, stating, "You don't need self-esteem." Catalyzed by the profound betrayal of her husband and therapist, Dr. Rosen, she undergoes a quiet but radical transformation. Her evolution culminates in the triumphant moment she coolly informs her ex-husband's business partners, "I bought them out," rediscovering a sense of purpose and satisfaction she had long forgotten as she tells him, "I forgot how much fun work can be." 4.2. Finding a voice. Crucially, these characters find their power not by hardening themselves, but by integrating their vulnerability with a newfound assertiveness. They learn that true strength lies in acknowledging their feelings, not in denying them. The turning point for Erica Barry comes not when she is writing or succeeding, but when she is at her most emotionally exposed. Her poignant confession to Harry, "I felt something with you that I never really knew existed. What am I going to do with all this?" is the moment she finally drops her armor. By embracing the emotional truth of her heartbreak, she reclaims her own narrative and ultimately empowers herself to demand the love she deserves. This complex portrait of the modern woman, at once fragile and formidable, guarded and open-hearted, is the core of Keaton's lasting cultural impact. Conclusion. We need the eggs. Across a landscape of diverse roles, Diane Keaton has consistently built and refined a singular portrait of a woman who is at once intelligent, neurotic, vulnerable, strong, and above all, authentic. She has given us characters who are not afraid to be messy, to fall apart and rebuild themselves, often in ways they never expected. It brings to mind the final joke from Annie Hall, Alvy Singer's ultimate take on human connection. "I guess that's pretty much now how I feel about relationships. You know, they're totally irrational and crazy and absurd, but I guess we keep going through it because most of us need the eggs." Keaton's cinematic legacy is precisely that. She gives us the eggs. Through her unforgettable characters, she reminds us that life and love are indeed messy, painful, and often absurd, but the honest, beautiful, and deeply relatable truths they contain are essential. They are what nourish us, what make us grow, and what make the whole chaotic, heartbreaking, and wonderful journey worthwhile. The Story of Alvy and Annie, a chronological summary 1.0, Introduction, the neurotic narrator. The story of Annie Hall is not told as it happened, but as it's remembered, and obsessively re-examined by its narrator, the neurotic comedian Alvy Singer. Following his breakup with Annie, Alvy sifts through the pieces of their relationship, trying to pinpoint where the screw-up came. He begins his tale not at the beginning of their romance, but with two jokes that encapsulate his entire worldview. His first joke frames his pessimistic philosophy on existence itself. There's an old joke. Two elderly women are at a Catskill mountain resort. One of them says, "The food at this place is really terrible." The other one says, "Yeah, I know, and such small portions." That's essentially how I feel about life. Full of loneliness and misery and suffering and unhappiness, and it's all over much too quickly. He then presents the joke he believes defines his romantic life, a paradox of self-worth and desire that haunts him. "I would never want to belong to any club that would have someone like me for a member." That's the key joke of my adult life in terms of my relationships with women. With this framework of philosophical pessimism and romantic insecurity, this summary will rearrange Alvy's scattered memories into a chronological story of his relationship with Annie Hall. By reassembling his fragmented, nonlinear recollections, we can trace the arc of the relationship as it actually happened, rather than as Alvy's anxious mind prefers to replay it. The beginning, an awkward and charming start. Alvy Singer and Annie Hall meet on a tennis court, introduced by their mutual friends Rob and Janet. Their initial courtship is defined by an awkward, quirky chemistry that highlights their contrasting personalities. Their dynamic of neurotic analysis meeting free spirited clumsiness is cemented in the famously awkward car ride home. Annie is from Chippewa Falls, Wisconsin. This immediately establishes her as an outsider to Alvy's quintessential New York world, a fact underscored when she mentions her Grammy Hall, a concept foreign to Alvy's Coney Island upbringing. Alvy has a problem with driving. He admits to having too much hostility to drive, a confession that comes just as Annie demonstrates her own terrifyingly bad driving skills. Annie uses quirky, old-fashioned expressions like la de da. This verbal tic fascinates and slightly bewilders Alvy, marking her as different from the intellectual, left-wing New York women he usually dates. Their first official date is an audition for Annie at a nightclub. She is incredibly nervous, but Alvy is supportive and encouraging. Before they even get to dinner, Alvy pragmatically initiates their first kiss to get it over with, believing it will help them digest their food better. On Annie's balcony after, a classic cinematic moment reveals their mutual insecurity through subtitles displaying their inner monologues. I wonder what she looks like naked? I'm not smart enough for him, perfectly illustrating the intellectual and neurotic gap between them from the start. The evening concludes over pastrami sandwiches, where Annie delivers a line that perfectly captures their offbeat connection. That was the most fun I've ever had without laughing. 3.0. The middle. Love, lobsters, and contrasting worlds. As their relationship deepens, Alvy and Annie's lives become more intertwined, their love growing stronger amidst their vastly different backgrounds and neuroses. Their time together is defined by several key moments that reveal the texture of their love. 1. The lobster scene. Their attempt to cook live lobsters dissolves into chaos as the creatures escape, scuttling across the kitchen floor. Alvy panics while Annie finds the situation hilarious, snapping pictures of the mayhem. The scene perfectly illustrates their dynamic. They find connection and joy even in mundane, stressful situations, turning panic into a shared, humorous memory. 2. Alvy as mentor and Svengali, Alvy takes on the role of intellectual mentor, but his encouragement is tied to his desire to mold her in his own intellectual and neurotic image. He buys Annie books on death and dying, a personal obsession of his, and encourages her to take adult education courses. He wants to shape her mind and share his world with her, just as he steadfastly supports her burgeoning singing career. 3. The life raft. Apartment. When Annie decides to move in with Alvy, he insists she keep her own small, bug-infested apartment, calling it a free-floating life raft. This reveals Alvy's deep-seated fear of commitment. Even at the peak of their intimacy, he needs the psychological safety net of knowing they aren't fully, irrevocably merged. The stark contrast in their upbringings is brilliantly illustrated by two family dinners, one a memory, the other a visit. Annie's family, the Halls. Alvy's family, the Singers. The atmosphere is quiet, polite, and classically waspy during their Easter dinner in Chippewa Falls. The atmosphere is loud, argumentative, and chaotic, with the family dinner table situated directly under a roller coaster. Conversation topics are mundane and provincial, centering on boat basins and swap meets. Grammy Hall is openly anti-Semitic. Conversation revolves around family arguments about money, illnesses, and who is stealing from whom. Eventually, the decline. Cracks in the foundation. The very things that brought Alvy and Annie together, their different personalities and Alvy's encouragement of Annie's growth, eventually begin to drive them apart. The relationship deteriorates not from a single event, but from a gradual drift fueled by personal evolution and unresolved insecurities. 1. Shifting dynamics in bed. Their sexual intimacy wanes. Annie begins smoking marijuana to relax before sex, a habit Alvy dislikes because it makes her seem distant and less present. This emotional distance is visualized in a famous scene where, during lovemaking, Annie's spirit literally gets out of bed and observes the act from a chair, highlighting Alvy's feeling that she is no longer fully there with him. 2. Therapy and independence. At Alvy's urging, Annie starts seeing a psychiatrist. The analysis helps her build confidence and a stronger sense of self, but it also creates distance. This stems from her developing an independent intellectual life that he can't control or participate in, a direct threat to his role as her mentor. He famously complains, "She's making progress and I'm getting screwed." Her newfound independence also leads to a suspected affair with her college professor, David, further deepening the cracks in their relationship. Number 3. The arrival of Tony Lacey. After a successful singing performance, Annie and Alvy meet Tony Lacey, a smooth, confident record producer from California. He is immediately taken with Annie's talent and charm, inviting them to a party with his celebrity friends. Tony represents a glamorous, mellow world of opportunity in Los Angeles, a world that fascinates Annie but repels Alvy, symbolizing a future for her that may not include him. Maybe ugly enough. 5.0. The end of an affair. Los Angeles and letting go. The growing distance between Alvy and Annie culminates in their breakup. In a frank conversation, Alvy uses a memorable metaphor to describe their stagnation. A relationship, I think, is like a shark. It has to constantly move forward or it dies. And I think what we got on our hands is a dead shark. Though they agree to the split, Alvy is haunted by the decision. After learning that Annie has moved to Los Angeles to live with Tony Lacey, he makes a desperate, impulsive trip to win her back. He meets her at a health food restaurant, a setting that underscores how out of place he is in her new life, and proposes marriage. Annie gently but firmly refuses. She explains that she is happy in California and that their dynamic has changed into a friendship. When Alvy presses her, asking if she loves him, she pointedly does not answer. Her gentle silence and refusal to give him the answer he desperately wants are what confirm the end. This is the final, definitive moment of their romantic story, forcing Alvy to accept that she has truly moved on. 6.0 Conclusion. The aftermath and the eggs. Back in New York, Alvy processes the breakup through his work. He writes a play about their relationship, but alters the ending. In his version, when he flies to LA to win Annie back, she agrees to return with him. He explains this artistic choice with a wistful observation. You know how you're always trying to get things to come out perfect in art because it's real difficult in life. Years later, Alvy and Annie run into each other on the Upper West Side. They have a friendly lunch, reminiscing about the old times. The tension and heartache are gone, replaced by a warm, mutual affection. They acknowledge the fun they had and what a terrific person the other was, cementing their successful transition from lovers to fond friends. Alvy closes his narrative with one final joke, which serves as his ultimate thesis on love and relationships. This guy goes to a psychiatrist and says, "Doc, my brother's crazy. He thinks he's a chicken." And the doctor says, "Well, why don't you turn him in?" And the guy says, "I would, but I need the eggs." This, Alvy concludes, is how he feels about relationships. They are totally irrational and crazy and absurd, full of pain and complication. But he, like most of us, keeps going through them because most of us need the eggs. 5 surprising truths about life. As told by the movies. There are moments in film that lodge themselves in your mind. A perfect line of dialogue, a quiet glance, a closing scene that reframes everything you just watched. They linger long after the credits roll, not just because they were clever or beautiful, but because they held a sliver of unexpected truth. These are the moments that don't just entertain, they reorient our thinking, offering a new lens through which to see our own lives. This article distills 5 such moments of unexpected wisdom from films that bypass conventional platitudes. They offer startlingly honest, often counterintuitive lessons on love, aging, crisis, and what it truly means to build a life. They remind us that sometimes the most profound answers are found not in grand philosophies, but in the absurd, chaotic, and beautifully imperfect stories we see on screen. Truth number one: relationships are absurd. We need the eggs anyway. At the end of Woody Allen's Annie Hall, after sifting through the pieces of his failed relationship, Alvy Singer lands on an old joke. He tells the story of a man who goes to a psychiatrist and says, "Doc, my brother's crazy. He thinks he's a chicken." When the doctor asks why he doesn't turn him in, the man replies, "I would, but I need the eggs." This is a profound and oddly comforting take on love. Instead of striving for a flawless ideal, it grants us permission to accept that relationships are often messy, illogical, and profoundly strange. We don't persist because they are perfect or even rational. We persist because our need for connection, for what the relationship provides, the metaphorical eggs, is a fundamental part of being human. It acknowledges the absurdity without dismissing the need. Well, I guess that's pretty much now how I feel about relationships. You know, they're totally irrational and crazy and absurd, but I guess we keep going through it because most of us need the eggs. Truth number two: a midlife crisis can be a love story in disguise. In Something's Gotta Give, Harry Sanborn is the embodiment of a carefully constructed life. A 63-year-old famous bachelor, he has built a fortress of youth around himself, exclusively dating women under 30. His life is a performance of virility and control, designed to keep vulnerability and age at bay. It takes a literal heart attack, striking him down in the kitchen of his young girlfriend's mother, to finally breach those defenses. Forced into a state of helplessness, he finds himself in the care of Erica Berry, a successful playwright his own age. The crisis doesn't just threaten his life, it dismantles his lifestyle. Stripped of his usual armor, he is forced to connect with someone as an equal, and in doing so, he experiences genuine, world-altering love for the first time. The very thing that seemed like an ending was actually the catalyst required to begin a more authentic life. Turns out the heart attack was easy to get over. You were something else. Truth number three: don't get mad, get everything, isn't about revenge. The inciting incident of the First Wives Club is classic revenge fantasy fuel. Three old friends, Annie, Elise, and Brenda, reunite after the suicide of a fourth, all of them having been left by their husbands for younger women. Their initial mission is simple and satisfying: retribution. They band together to hit their exes where it hurts, but somewhere along the way, their goal undergoes a crucial transformation. The rage that initially united them is channeled into something far more powerful. They realize that getting everything doesn't mean just taking back what was theirs. It means leveraging their pain, resources, and shared experience to create something new. They pivot from targeting their ex-husbands to founding the Cynthia Swan Griffin Crisis Center for Women, turning their personal pain into a public good. The everything they get, in the end, isn't revenge, but purpose. Ladies, we have to be strong and independent. And remember, don't get mad, get everything. Truth number four: your true priorities are measured in vet bills. Life is a constant negotiation of value. We agonize over mortgages, investments, and the fluctuating price of our assets. But every so often, a crisis cuts through the noise and reveals with startling clarity what we truly hold dear. In film, that clarifying agent is often a dog. In Five Flights Up, Alex and Ruth spend days agonizing over selling their Brooklyn apartment, a property worth nearly $1 million. Yet, when their dog Dorothy needs surgery, there isn't a moment of hesitation before approving the $10,000 procedure. As Alex tells the vet, the money doesn't matter. Just do whatever it takes. In Darling Companion, the frantic, multi-day search for a lost dog named Freeway becomes the crucible in which a marriage is tested. Joseph, a work-obsessed surgeon, is initially dismissive of his wife Beth's emotional connection to the animal he accidentally lost. But the crisis forces him off the pedestal of his own self-absorption and into a shared, desperate mission. The journey culminates in a moment of profound clarity, articulated not by his emotionally attuned wife, but by the surgeon himself, the powerful culmination of his transformation. Love is love. It doesn't matter if it's a dog. Truth number five: sometimes life's chaos just brings you home. The central conflict in Five Flights Up is one of overwhelming change and uncertainty. Alex and Ruth decide to sell the apartment they've lived in for 40 years, launching themselves into a weekend of open houses, bidding wars, and citywide anxiety over a potential terror threat on the Williamsburg Bridge. The world outside their walls is a chaotic, unpredictable force pushing them toward a new life. Yet, after navigating the frenzy, the intrusive prospective buyers, the opportunistic agents, the nerve-wracking news reports, they arrive at a surprising conclusion. They decide to stay. The decision isn't financial or even entirely logical. The ordeal served as a reminder of what they already had. The chaos of the outside world didn't drive them away, but instead clarified the immense value of the sanctuary they had built together. The roller coaster ride simply brought them back to where they started, like with a renewed understanding of who they were and what truly mattered. Those few days were like one big roller coaster ride, and like most rides, we ended up where we began. Still, it reminded us who we are, what we have. It was worth it, if only for that. The important thing is it brought us back here together, back to our senses and to our home. Conclusion. Find your reasons. From the absurdity of love to the clarifying power of a crisis, these cinematic lessons aren't about providing easy answers. They are about finding clarity amidst the chaos, reevaluating what truly matters, and having the courage to act on it. In the end, movies don't give us the answers, but they ask the right questions. What are the things you can't live without? And what are you willing to go through to keep them? Psychological case study, Alvy Singer. 1.0 Identifying information and presenting problem. This case study presents a psychological analysis of Alvy Singer, a comedian who provides a self-reported narrative of his personal and romantic history. The subject is engaged in a retrospective examination of his life, prompted by the recent dissolution of a significant romantic relationship. His introspective and highly articulate account, though subjective, offers a rich narrative for exploring the interplay between developmental history, core anxieties, and recurring patterns in interpersonal relationships. Name, Alvy Singer. Age 40. Occupation, comedian. Presenting problem. The subject reports significant distress and obsessive rumination following the termination of his relationship with his former partner, Annie. He is actively engaged in a process of self-analysis to understand the screw-up in this and previous relationships. Mr. Singer frames his life philosophy through two key jokes, indicating a high degree of intellectualization and a pessimistic worldview. He first establishes a foundation of existential dread. I feel that life is divided up into the horrible and the miserable. Those are the two categories. The horrible would be like terminal cases, and blind people, and cripples, and the miserable is everyone else. So you should be thankful that you're miserable. He then identifies a more specific conflict as the foundation of his romantic failures, which he explicitly articulates through a joke he attributes to Groucho Marx. I would never want to belong to any club that would have someone like me for a member. That's the key joke of my adult life in terms of my relationships with women. This central conflict appears to be the primary source of his current distress. The following analysis will examine the subject's formative years to trace the potential origins of this self-defeating pattern. 2.0 Developmental and Family History. A subject's developmental history is of strategic importance in understanding the origins of adult personality structures and relational patterns. This section will analyze Mr. Singer's self-reported childhood experiences and family dynamics to identify the potential antecedents of his adult anxieties, pessimistic outlook, and difficulties with intimacy. 2.1 Early Environment. The subject reports being brought up in Brooklyn during World War II, in a home situated directly under the Coney Island roller coaster. This chaotic and noisy sensory environment may have contributed to his self-described disposition. He states that this upbringing perhaps accounts for my personality, which is a little nervous, and notes, I have a hyperactive imagination. This suggests a constitutional and environmental predisposition towards an anxious temperament from a very early age. 2.2 Precocious anxiety and depression. Mr. Singer provides a powerful anecdote from his early childhood that serves as a prototypical example of his lifelong existential concerns. As a young boy, he became clinically depressed after learning that the universe is expanding. His rationale, as he reports it, was a profound sense of futility. Alvi, the universe is everything. If it's expanding, someday it will break apart, and that will be the end of everything. What is that your business? He stopped doing his homework. What's the point? What has the universe got to do with it? You're here in Brooklyn. Brooklyn is not expanding. This incident is a significant marker of precocious existential dread and a tendency toward catastrophic thinking. He was unable to find comfort in the immediate and concrete, instead becoming overwhelmed by an abstract and distant threat, a pattern that appears to persist into his adulthood. 2.3 Family Dynamics. The subject portrays his family environment as emotionally turbulent and contentious. He offers a memory of his parents arguing loudly and frequently, citing a specific conflict over his mother firing their cleaner. Father, you fired the cleaner? Mother, she stole. Father, she's colored. They have enough trouble. Mother, she went through my pocketbook. Father, they're persecuted enough. Mother, so we can afford it. This exchange illustrates a household characterized by high conflict communication, guilt, and externalized blame. This environment, where affection and conflict are loudly and chaotically intertwined, likely contributed to the subject's difficulty in distinguishing between stable intimacy and high-stakes drama, a pattern evident in his later romantic entanglements. 2.4 Early Social and Psychosexual Development. Mr. Singer recounts an incident at age 6 in which he was reprimanded for kissing a female classmate. His defense at the time was notably intellectualized and advanced for his age. I was just expressing a healthy sexual curiosity. He further comments on this period by stating, "For God's sakes, Alvi, even Freud speaks of a latency period. Well, I never had a latency period." This self-assessment, whether accurate or a retrospective construction, points to a precocious and potentially dysregulated psychosexual development. This early fusion of sexuality and intellectual defense may be a precursor to his adult tendency to use abstract obsessions, such as the Kennedy conspiracy, as a means to avoid genuine sexual intimacy. These developmental factors, a nervous disposition, early onset existential dread, a chaotic family life, and precocious sexuality, provide a foundational context for the specific anxieties and phobias he exhibits as an adult. 3.0 Psychological Profile. Core anxieties and phobias. A subject's recurring anxieties and phobias provide a clear window into their underlying psychological structure. These fears are not random. They are organized around central conflicts and beliefs. This section will categorize and analyze Alvi Singer's specific fears as reported in his narrative, which he manages primarily through intellectualization and humor. Pervasive pessimism and existential dread. The subject maintains a fundamentally negative worldview, which he often presents as objective truth. This belief system appears to be a core component of his identity. Paranoid ideation. Mr. Singer exhibits a persistent pattern of interpreting benign or ambiguous social cues as personally hostile or threatening, with a specific focus on anti-Semitism. This suggests an underlying persecutory anxiety, obsessive-compulsive traits. The subject displays rigid behaviors and a need for order and predictability, becoming highly anxious when routines are disrupted. This is most evident in his relationship with media consumption. Situational phobias. He reports intense anxiety and disdain for specific environments that he perceives as lacking in cultural substance or intellectual rigor, most notably Los Angeles. Performance anxiety. Despite his profession as a comedian, the subject demonstrates significant anxiety related to the act of performing, suggesting a fear of inadequacy or failure. These generalized anxieties provide the emotional backdrop for his life and appear to manifest with particular intensity within his interpersonal and romantic relationships. 4.0 Analysis of interpersonal relationship patterns. This section will dissect the subject's recurring patterns in romantic relationships. These patterns are the primary focus of his self-analysis and the source of his presenting problem. His narrative explicitly links his relational failures to his core psychological conflicts, providing clear case studies for examination. 4.1 The Central Conflict. The Groucho Marx Complex. The subject's foundational belief system for relationships is encapsulated in the Groucho Marx joke he frequently cites. I would never want to belong to any club that would have someone like me for a member. This statement is not merely a witticism, but a profound articulation of his core pathology. It indicates a level of low self-worth so deep that he cannot respect or desire anyone who would choose him. This dynamic leads to a predictable and self-defeating cycle. He pursues a partner, but as soon as that partner reciprocates his affection and accepts him, he begins to devalue and reject them. His desire is contingent on the partner's unattainability. 4.2 Case Study. Allison Porchnick, First Wife. The subject describes his first wife, Allison, as an intellectual and cultural peer. New York, Jewish, left-wing, liberal, intellectual. This suggests an initial attraction based on shared identity and values. However, the relationship failed as a direct result of his self-sabotaging behavior. He reports developing an obsession with the Kennedy assassination conspiracy, which Allison correctly identified as a defense mechanism to avoid sex with me. His own reflection on the relationship's demise demonstrates his awareness of this self-defeating pattern. Why did I turn off Allison Porchnick? She was beautiful, she was willing, she was real intelligent. Is it the old Groucho Marx joke? 4.3 Case Study. Annie Hall. The subject's relationship with Annie is the primary focus of his narrative and serves as the most detailed illustration of his relational dysfunction. 4.3.1 Initial Idealization. Their meeting is characterized by awkwardness and mutual charm. He is attracted to her unique style and perceived authenticity, e.g., her use of la-da-da. He reports that in the early stages of their relationship, we had sex constantly, suggesting a period of intense connection and idealization before his core conflicts emerged. 4.3.2 Emergence of Dysfunction. As the relationship progressed, several key points of conflict arose, consistently demonstrating his need for control and his anxieties surrounding intimacy. Control and intellectual superiority. He began a campaign to improve Annie by pressuring her to take adult education courses and giving her books on death. She later confronts him with her interpretation of this behavior. You don't think I'm smart enough. This dynamic placed him in a superior directorial role, undermining the equality necessary for a healthy partnership. Sexual difficulties. The initial intense sexual connection faded. Annie reported needing to smoke marijuana to relax enough for intercourse, indicating a growing tension in their physical intimacy. He became deeply threatened by her analysis of a dream in which Frank Sinatra suffocates her, interpreting it as a symbolic representation of his own suffocating presence in her life. This insight from her therapy felt like a personal attack rather than an opportunity for mutual understanding. Lifestyle incompatibility. He displayed open hostility toward the mellow California culture introduced to Annie by music producer Tony Lacey. Her growing comfort and success in that world represented a threat to his control and a move away from the New York identity he found safe. 4.3.3 Dissolution and Failed Reconciliation. After their separation, and only after Annie had moved to Los Angeles and started a new life in relationship with Tony Lacey, Alvy flew across the country in a desperate attempt to win her back by proposing marriage. Her refusal solidifies the relational pattern. This behavior is a classic pursuit-distance dynamic. He only felt the overwhelming need to commit to her once she was firmly unavailable. The very act of her leaving him made her a desirable member of a club he could no longer join, reigniting his pursuit. These case studies consistently demonstrate a self-defeating pattern in which the subject's deep-seated feelings of unworthiness prevent him from sustaining intimacy, thus informing the final diagnostic impressions. 5.0 Diagnostic Impressions and Summary. This section provides a clinical synthesis of the preceding analysis. While a formal diagnosis is not possible without a direct clinical interview and standardized assessments, the self-reported evidence from Mr. Singer's narrative strongly suggests a number of persistent psychological patterns and personality traits that significantly impair his functioning, particularly in the romantic domain. 1. Generalized anxiety with pessimistic outlook. The subject displays chronic worry, nervousness, a little nervous, and a deeply pessimistic worldview that he manages through intellectualization and humor. His childhood depression over the expanding universe, what's the point, is a powerful early indicator of this lifelong pattern of existential anxiety. Number 2, paranoid and narcissistic traits. He demonstrates a tendency toward paranoid ideation, persecutory beliefs, and is highly self-referential, interpreting external events primarily in terms of how they affect him, as seen in his reaction to Annie missing her therapy. Do you know what a hostile gesture that is to me? This is not grandiose narcissism, but rather a negative narcissism linked to the Groucho Marx complex. His self-focus reinforces a core belief of unworthiness, making him hypervigilant to perceived slights that confirm this negative self-concept. Number 3. Avoidant features. The subject actively avoids situations that trigger anxiety, including specific social settings, parties in Los Angeles, environments, the countryside, which makes me nervous, and most critically, genuine emotional intimacy. His use of conspiracy theories to create distance from his first wife is a prime example of using intellectual obsessions to avoid relational closeness. Number 4. Core pattern of relational self-sabotage. The most prominent and functionally impairing feature of the subject's profile is a deeply ingrained pattern of devaluing and pushing away partners who show him affection and acceptance. This behavior is rooted in a core belief of his own unworthiness, which he masterfully articulates through the Groucho Marx complex. He appears unable to sustain desire for a partner who fully reciprocates his interest, creating a cycle of pursuit and rejection that ensures his relationships ultimately fail. In summary, Alvy Singer presents as a highly intelligent, articulate, and professionally successful individual. However, his capacity for sustained happiness and fulfilling intimacy is severely impaired by deep-seated anxiety, a powerfully pessimistic worldview, and a self-defeating approach to romantic love. His narrative is a compelling account of how profound feelings of inadequacy can sabotage the very connection and acceptance an individual consciously seeks. The Catalyst of Crisis, an analysis of love, loss, and transformation across 5 cinematic narratives. Introduction: the narrative function of crisis in relationships. In storytelling, as in life, profound crises often serve as powerful narrative catalysts. They disrupt the equilibrium of characters' lives, forcing them to confront fundamental truths about their relationships, their identities, and their futures. Whether sudden and catastrophic, or the culmination of long-simmering tensions, these moments of rupture act as narrative crucibles, testing the bonds of partnership and revealing the latent strengths or fatal flaws within. When the familiar structures of a shared existence are shaken, characters are compelled to re-examine the very foundations upon which their lives are built. This analysis will explore this phenomenon through 5 distinct cinematic narratives: Annie Hall, The First Wives Club, Darling Companion, 5 Flights Up, and Something's Gotta Give. Each film presents a unique case study deploying a different form of crisis, from the quiet implosion of a romance to the communal shock of a friend's death, from the frantic search for a lost pet to the stark confrontation with mortality. The objective of this document is to analyze how each narrative uniquely deploys a crisis to deconstruct and explore the complexities of modern love, partnership, and personal transformation. We begin with a crisis that is not an event, but a memory, an obsessive, neurotic, and deeply personal reflection on a love that has already ended. 1. The retrospective crisis, deconstructing a relationship in Annie Hall. Annie Hall strategically inverts the traditional narrative structure by positioning the central crisis, the breakup of Alvy Singer and Annie Hall, not as a climactic event, but as the inciting incident. The film is a prolonged, nonlinear postmortem, a deeply personal and neurotic self-examination triggered by loss. Alvy Singer's retrospective crisis is an attempt to sift through the pieces of the relationship, blurring the lines between memory, fantasy, and reality to understand where, exactly, the screw-up came from. Analysis of Alvy's opening monologue. Alvy Singer frames his entire relational philosophy through 2 old jokes in his opening monologue. These jokes are not mere punchlines. They are the thematic pillars upon which his retrospective analysis is built. 1. On life. He recounts a joke about 2 women at a resort complaining about the food being terrible, and such small portions. He immediately connects this to his worldview. That's essentially how I feel about life, full of loneliness and misery and suffering and unhappiness, and it's all over much too quickly. This establishes his inherent pessimism and existential dread, a lens through which he views all subsequent events. 2. On relationships. He quotes a line attributed to Groucho Marx: "I would never want to belong to any club that would have someone like me for a member." Alvey identifies this as the key joke of my adult life in terms of my relationships with women, revealing a core self-loathing that sabotages his capacity for connection. If a woman accepts him, she must be flawed, creating an unsolvable paradox. These jokes prime the audience to understand that Alvey's examination of his breakup with Annie is not an objective search for truth, but a subjective quest to validate his pre-existing neurotic framework. The blurring of reality and memory. To illustrate Alvey's struggle to process the relationship's end, the narrative frequently abandons linear reality, allowing him to manipulate his own memories. This technique reveals his inability to objectively process the past, as he constantly interrupts, edits, and restages events to fit his perspective. Summoning the expert. While standing in a movie line, Alvey grows increasingly agitated by a man pontificating loudly about Marshall McLuhan. Rather than simply enduring it, Alvey breaks the fourth wall, addresses the audience, and then physically pulls McLuhan himself from off-screen to debunk the man's opinions. This fantasy insertion demonstrates his desperate need to control his environment and be proven right, a trait that likely plagued his relationship with Annie. Revisiting childhood. Alvey often steps directly into scenes from his past as an adult observer. He revisits his childhood home under the Coney Island roller coaster, commenting on his family's arguments as they happen. This technique visualizes the act of psychoanalysis, showing how the adult Alvey is forever trapped by and reinterpreting the anxieties of his youth. Juxtaposing family dynamics. During a memory of Easter dinner with Annie's placid, waspish family, Alvey imposes a split-screen image of his own chaotic Jewish family dinner. The contrast is stark and comedic, but it also reveals his profound sense of cultural alienation and his inability to ever feel truly integrated into Annie's world. Thematic divergence in partnership. The ultimate failure of Alvey and Annie's relationship is rooted in their fundamentally divergent paths. While Alvey remains mired in his intellectual anxieties, Annie pursues personal and emotional growth, creating a chasm between them. Alvey's neurotic focus. Annie's pursuit of growth. Psychoanalysis. Stagnating after 15 years of therapy, he is threatened by Annie's rapid progress. Self-discovery. Embraces therapy and quickly has a breakthrough, recounting a dream where Frank Sinatra, a singer like Alvey, holds a pillow over her face, symbolizing how Alvey is suffocating her. City life. Views New York as the center of the universe, dismissing Los Angeles as a cultural wasteland where the only cultural advantage is that you can make a right turn on a red light. Expansion. Finds opportunity and a more relaxed lifestyle in California, embracing a new environment that supports her burgeoning singing career. Social interactions. Deeply paranoid and hostile, he sees anti-Semitism everywhere and is threatened by intellectuals in social gatherings. Openness. Enjoys meeting new people, yet even if they challenge Alvey, like Tony Lacey, and is open to new experiences and perspectives. Ultimately, Alvey's retrospective crisis does not lead to reconciliation or profound change. Instead, it culminates in a state of bittersweet acceptance, a nostalgic acknowledgement of a love that was real but unsustainable. This solitary reflection stands in sharp contrast to the next narrative, which examines how a crisis galvanizes a group toward collective action. Unlike 2. The existential crisis, from victimhood to collective empowerment in the First Wives Club. Unlike the internal reflective crisis of Annie Hall, the catalyst in the First Wives Club is an external, communal shock, the suicide of a college friend, Cynthia Swan Griffin. Her death, a direct result of being abandoned by her husband for a younger woman, serves as an existential threat to her three estranged friends, Brenda, Elise, and Annie. It forces them to recognize their own shared vulnerability and transforms their individual grief and humiliation into a powerful, unified force for justice. The catalyst of loss. The film's central conflict is born at Cynthia's funeral, where the three protagonists are reunited after years of distance. They learn that Cynthia jumped from her penthouse apartment the day after her ex-husband, Gilbert Griffin, remarried. The crisis is given its explicit mission statement through Cynthia's final letters to each of them, in which her parting plea, "Please take care of each other, love, Cynthia," becomes the foundational principle of the First Wives Club, shifting their focus from personal pain to a shared purpose. Synthesizing shared grievances. Over a long, boozy lunch, the women's individual stories of abandonment pour out, revealing a painful and humiliating pattern. Their shared grievances become the glue that rebonds their friendship. Number 1. Brenda Cushman. Her husband, Morty, a television electronics magnate, left her after a major midlife crisis that involved working out, getting an earring, and complaining that she wouldn't go rollerblading. He took up with their young, skinny new partner, Shelley. Number 2. Elise Acheson. A famous actress, she was abandoned by her film producer husband, Bill, who left her for a rising young starlet, Phoebe. Elise fears that losing her youth means losing her career and relevance, stating that there are only 3 ages for women in Hollywood: babe, district attorney, and driving Miss Daisy. Number 3. Annie Paradis. The most hesitant of the group, she reveals that her husband, Aaron, has left her for their therapist, Dr. Leslie Rosen. She initially frames it as a temporary separation, but is ultimately forced to confront the betrayal. The evolution from revenge to justice. The club's initial impulse is pure, unadulterated revenge. Brenda's emotionally charged declaration, "I want him dumped," by Little Miss Midriff, encapsulates their early desire to inflict the same humiliation they have endured. However, as their plans coalesce, their mission evolves into something more strategic and ultimately more profound. The turning point comes when they realize the limitations of personal vengeance. In a final confrontation, Elise articulates their new philosophy to their ex-husbands. The only people that would be helped by revenge would be us, and then we'd be no better than you. They decide to use the leverage they've gained not just for personal profit, but to establish a nonprofit organization to help other abused and abandoned women. Operation Hell's Fury, a tactical breakdown. To achieve their goals, the First Wives Club moves from emotional reaction to tactical precision, identifying and exploiting the specific vulnerabilities of each ex-husband. Husband-identified vulnerability. Strategic action taken. Morty Cushman. Stolen merchandise and fraudulent accounting. Hot stuff. Leaks this information to gain control of his company's lucrative advertising account for Annie's agency. Bill Acheson. His relationship with Phoebe, who is revealed to be underage. Uses this information to force him to liquidate all their shared assets and turn the proceeds over to the club. Aaron Paradis. His advertising partners desire to sell their shares of the firm. Annie, funded by the auction of Bill's assets, buys out the partners and becomes Aaron's new boss. This shared crisis does not mend their original marriages, but instead forges a new, powerful community built on mutual support and a commitment to a greater good, transitioning us from a crisis that builds a community to one that tests the fragile bonds of a pre-existing one. The proximal crisis, a lost pet as a stand-in for a lost marriage in Darling Companion. In Darling Companion, the central crisis appears, on its surface, to be the simple and heartbreaking loss of a beloved pet. However, the disappearance of the dog, Freeway, serves as a powerful proxy for a deeper, unacknowledged crisis within the marriage of Beth and Joseph Winter. The frantic, multi-day search for the animal is not merely about finding a dog. It is a narrative device that forces a direct and painful confrontation with years of accumulated emotional neglect, divergent values, and the growing chasm between them. The initial void and Freeway's arrival, the narrative opens by establishing a profound void in Beth's life. She is overcome with emotion after her daughter Grace and infant grandson leave for the airport. Joseph, already engrossed in his work as a surgeon, is dismissive of her pain, instructing Grace over the phone, "Tell her to please calm down." It is in this state of emotional isolation that Beth finds Freeway, abandoned and injured on the side of the highway. Her dramatic rescue immediately positions the dog as a receptacle for the affection and attention her marriage no longer provides. Freeway becomes a source of profound emotional fulfillment, filling a space that Joseph has long since vacated. The act of negligence. The crisis is triggered by a singular act of negligence that symbolizes Joseph's broader inattentiveness. While walking Freeway, Joseph becomes distracted by a work call regarding a patient who wants a second opinion. He waves off Freeway's barking, saying, "I got to go, Ruthie," and crucially fails to use the dog whistle Beth relies on. Freeway chases a deer into the woods and disappears. This moment is not accidental. It is the direct result of Joseph prioritizing his professional life over the thing Beth values most, mirroring the central dynamic of their marital decay. The confrontation of values. The search for Freeway quickly devolves into a heated argument that lays bare the core conflict in their marriage. Beth's accusation and Joseph's defense explicitly frame the dog as the focal point of their years of discord. Beth's accusation. When Joseph minimizes her panic, Beth confronts him with the underlying issue. "You don't think I've noticed that you care more about him than you do about me?" This line reveals her belief that Joseph is not just dismissive of the dog, but jealous of the emotional connection she has with it. Joseph's incomprehension. Unable to grasp the emotional weight of the situation, Joseph retorts, "We haven't lost a person. We've lost a dog." His response underscores his clinical detachment and his inability to validate Beth's feelings. Beth's rebuttal. Beth articulates the central theme of the crisis with her passionate reply, "Love is love. It doesn't matter if it's a dog." She asserts that the love she feels for Freeway is as valid and significant as any other form of love, a concept Joseph cannot comprehend. Resolution. Through shared adversity. The turning point in their relationship occurs when their search leads them to become lost in the woods during a storm. In a fall, Joseph dislocates his shoulder, rendering him helpless. This event functions as a catalyst for a necessary inversion of their traditional marital roles. The physically capable surgeon becomes dependent and vulnerable, while the emotionally focused wife is forced to become a pragmatic, physical savior. Guided by his instructions, Beth must take charge and painfully reset his arm. This forced interdependence, his clinical knowledge guiding her physical strength, is the mechanism that breaks down their long-held, dysfunctional dynamic. By compelling them to renegotiate their partnership on a foundation of mutual reliance rather than detached coexistence, the crisis begins to repair their fractured connection. When they finally find Freeway, their joy and relief are shared, not separate, signaling a genuine reunification. The film concludes by demonstrating how a proximal crisis can repair a long-term partnership, a theme that provides a thoughtful transition to our next narrative, which explores how a more direct physical crisis can spark an unexpected romance in later life. Four, the physical crisis. A heart attack is a catalyst for vulnerability in Something's Gotta Give. In Something's Gotta Give, Harry Sanborn's heart attack is far more than a medical emergency. It is a profound physical crisis that systematically dismantles his meticulously constructed life of emotional detachment and superficial relationships. For decades, Harry has operated as an escape artist, avoiding commitment and any woman his own age. The analysis of this section will focus on how this sudden, forced vulnerability, both physical and emotional, strips him of his defenses and leads to an unexpected and transformative relationship with his contemporary, the playwright Erica Barry. Deconstruction of the escape artist. Before the heart attack, Harry Sanborn is defined by a rigid set of rules designed to keep intimacy at bay. His opening monologue and early interactions with Marin paint a clear picture of a man who prizes control and avoids emotional depth at all costs. Exclusive preference for younger women. When Marin suggests her mother is not his type, he casually replies, "I don't have a type. She's over 30. This rule is his primary defense mechanism, ensuring his partners are less experienced and less likely to challenge him. Avoidance of commitment. He proudly embraces the title of an article written about him, The Escape Artist, noting, "I've escaped the noose for so long." Marriage and long-term partnership are framed as traps to be avoided. Emotional distance. His philosophy on relationships is summarized by his desire to just like to travel light, indicating a refusal to carry any emotional baggage or form deep, lasting connections. Forced intimacy and shifting dynamics. The heart attack is a symbolic event. Harry, the escape artist, is suddenly imprisoned not by walls but by his own physical frailty. Physically trapped in Erica's beach house, the very environment he was desperate to flee, he is stripped of his independence and his ability to escape. This forces him into the very scenario he has spent his life avoiding: sustained, non-sexual intimacy with a woman his own age. He is suddenly reliant on Erica's care, a situation that upends their initial dynamic. The witty, combative energy between them gives way to moments of surprising connection, such as their late-night conversations in the kitchen and the shared, simple intimacy of making pancakes. The crisis deconstructs his emotional defenses by forcing him to engage with Erica not as a conquest, but as an equal. The aftermath and emotional awakening. After Harry has seemingly recovered and left Erica's home, their relationship implodes in a painful argument. The emotional fallout triggers a second, more revealing physical crisis. Rushed to the hospital again, Harry learns from Dr. Mercer that he did not have another heart attack. Instead, the doctor explains that a severe anxiety attack can masquerade as a heart attack, and that it was brought on by stress. This diagnosis is the film's pivotal moment. Harry's emotional turmoil over losing Erica has manifested with the same physical severity as a life-threatening cardiac event. It is undeniable proof that he is deeply, emotionally attached to Erica in a way he has never been with another woman. His carefully built defenses have completely crumbled. He later articulates this transformation to Erica directly, admitting, "Turns out the heart attack was easy to get over. You were something else." The physical crisis of the heart attack was merely the prelude to the much more profound and life-altering emotional crisis of falling in love. Harry's journey of confronting mortality and discovering unexpected love in his later years connects directly to our final case study, which examines the challenge of reaffirming existing love when faced with a similar convergence of late-life pressures. 5. The converging crises, navigating home, health, and history in 5 flights. Up the final case study, 5 Flights Up, presents a unique convergence of crises that descend upon a couple in the twilight of their 40-year partnership. Unlike the singular explosive events in the other narratives, this film weaves together 3 distinct pressures: the practical crisis of selling a longtime home, the sudden emotional crisis of a pet's life-threatening illness, and the ambient civic crisis of a potential terror threat unfolding in their city. This section will analyze how these overlapping challenges force the protagonists, Alex and Ruth Carver, to strip away the noise of modern life and reaffirm the profound value of their shared history and enduring love. Pressure points of change. At the outset, a collection of external and internal pressures forces Alex and Ruth to confront the reality of their age and consider selling their beloved but impractical Brooklyn apartment. Physical limitations. The 5 flights of stairs, once a mere inconvenience, are now a looming challenge. Ruth voices their shared concern about the future, asking Alex, "I handle the stairs better than Lily does." "Sure you do now, honey. But what about later?" Neighborhood gentrification. Their once unfashionable neighborhood has become cool now, filled with hipsters and expensive strollers. This is not just a practical pressure, but a sociological one. The gentrification renders them culturally alien in their own home, mirroring their internal crisis of aging and relevance. Financial opportunity. The skyrocketing value of their apartment presents a life-changing opportunity. As Alex notes, "But how can I turn down $1 million? I have nothing else to leave Ruth." This financial pressure adds a pragmatic weight to their emotional decision. The emotional anchor? Dorothy's illness. Just as they are navigating the stressful open house, a far more immediate crisis strikes. Their elderly dog, Dorothy, collapses with a ruptured disc. This event becomes the emotional core of the film, stripping away their anxieties about real estate and forcing them to confront what truly matters. Their differing initial reactions highlight their core personalities. Ruth is immediately committed to doing whatever it takes, while Alex, the pragmatist, worries about the cost and even signs a DNR form. However, the crisis prompts a pivotal moment of recommitment from Alex. Over the phone with the veterinarian, he overrides his earlier practicality and declares, "Listen, I want you to do whatever is necessary to save Dorothy. The money doesn't matter." In this moment, Alex makes a conscious decision to prioritize love and loyalty over financial sense, a choice that foreshadows the film's ultimate resolution. The climax and reaffirmation. The narrative reaches its climax not in their apartment, but in the sleek, modern apartment they are about to buy. As they prepare to sign the contract, Alex sees a news report revealing the supposed terrorist who had paralyzed the city. He looks at the suspect's face and says, "He's just a kid." This moment of humanization triggers a profound realization. He sees how fear and speculation have driven their decisions and asks Ruth the central question of the film. Why are we moving? What are we chasing? He recognizes that they are being worked up over nothing, trading a home filled with 40 years of history for a vague and ultimately empty promise of an easier future. Final resolution. In his concluding narration, Alex summarizes the profound lesson learned from their weekend of converging crises. The external pressures did not ultimately force a change, but rather illuminated the immense value of what they already possessed. He reflects, and like most rides, we ended up where we began. Still, it reminded us who we are, what we have. The important thing is it brought us back here, together, back to our senses and to our home. The journey through crisis served as a powerful reminder, allowing them to see their life, their home, and their partnership not through a lens of deficiency and fear, but with renewed appreciation and love. This final case study provides a fitting transition to a broader synthesis of the insights these 5 narratives collectively offer. 6. Synthesis and conclusion. Common threads in relational resilience. While each of the 5 cinematic narratives explores a unique crisis through a distinct lens, a comparative analysis reveals common patterns in how relationships are tested, dismantled, and ultimately transformed. From the internal monologue of a failed romance to the collective action of empowered friends, these stories collectively map the terrain of relational resilience, illustrating that the path through crisis is often the only path to a deeper understanding of oneself and one's partner. Comparative analysis of catalysts. Film nature of the crisis. Primary conflict exposed relational outcome. Annie Hall retrospective, a post-breakup analysis of a failed relationship. The fundamental divergence between Alvy's neurosis and Annie's growth. Bittersweet acceptance and nostalgic friendship. No reconciliation. The First Wives Club. Existential. The suicide of a friend galvanizes collective action. The systemic disregard for and disposability of middle-aged women. Dissolution of old marriages, but the formation of a new, empowered female community. Darling companion. Proximal. The loss of a pet acts as a stand-in for a failing marriage. Years of emotional neglect and conflicting value systems within a partnership. Repair and recommitment to the marriage through forced interdependence and vulnerability. Something's gotta give. Physical. A heart attack forces vulnerability on an emotional escape artist. The conflict between lifelong emotional detachment and genuine intimacy. Dissolution of a superficial relationship with Marin, and the formation of a new, mature love. 5 flights up converging, overlapping pressures, health, home, civic, test a long-term bond. The tension between embracing change and valuing history and stability. A profound reaffirmation of their existing 40-year partnership and home. Distilling core insights. Synthesizing the findings from these 5 analyses reveals 3 key takeaways regarding the function of crisis in modern relationships. 1. Crisis as a mirror. In each narrative, the crisis does not create a conflict so much as it reflects and magnifies the pre-existing state of the relationship. In Darling Companion, the lost dog exposes a marriage already hollowed out by neglect. In Annie Hall, the breakup forces Alvy to confront the self-sabotaging patterns that were always present. The crisis, therefore, functions less as an external agent of change and more as a sociological stress test, revealing the latent structural integrity or inherent fault lines of the partnership. 2. Vulnerability as a prerequisite for growth. A striking common thread is the role of forced vulnerability in breaking down defenses and enabling change. Harry Sanborn's heart attack physically incapacitates him, forcing an intimacy he would have otherwise fled. Beth and Joseph's ordeal in the storm strips them of their established roles, compelling them to rely on each other in a new way. The women of the First Wives Club must first admit their shared pain and humiliation before they can unite in strength. These moments demonstrate that true transformation, whether personal or relational, is often impossible without first surrendering control. 3. The redefinition of success. These narratives collectively challenge conventional binary definitions of relational success, i.e., staying together, and failure, i.e., breaking up. Success is portrayed as a spectrum of outcomes. It can be the empowered independence found by the protagonists of the First Wives Club. It can be the bittersweet, loving acceptance of an irreconcilable parting, as seen in Annie Hall. Or it can be a profound recommitment to an imperfect but deeply cherished partnership, as demonstrated in Five Flights Up, Darling Companion, and Something's Gotta Give. These cinematic stories articulate a universal and enduring truth that the most profound understanding of love, partnership, and self often emerges not from the calm seas of contentment, but from the turbulent waters of life's most significant disruptions.